Hacker News hates NeoVim. All right. At least that's what I've been told by TJ. Is this true?
Well, yeah, it looks like a few people have finally gotten to the top with a little bit of a positive attitude. But when I checked this earlier today, all the top comments were just like, yeah, man, why would you even ever use NeoVim? I just use VS Code for anything more than simple text editing.
Simple. Why would the real question is why would you use Vim for simple text editing? That actually sounds like more of an inconvenience to use that one program you never do with arcane motions and weirdness. Like,
yeah,
that actually seems
you
like
already
the worst
took all
answer.
the time to just have VS Code, and you're like, dude, I don't know, I'm just gonna edit some simple things, and you're like, well, you already have several gigs dedicated to this VS Code instance. Why not just use it? You know,
Something tells me maybe there's a flaw here going on.
Yeah.
All right. So obviously, how it all got started is that there's a getting started on LazyVim. Now, LazyVim, I'm not sure who sets this up. This looks like Tokyo Knight, maybe. So I'm just gonna assume Falky or someone that's a Falky fan.
It is Falky, actually. Yeah.
Oh, it is Falky. Okay, this feels like a Falky. This feels very Falky. So this is very good. Lots of stuff. Obviously, it does all the things you might want in here. Blah 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 blah. Easy to get started. LazyVim. And then Hacker News saw this, and someone posted it. Tambourine Man. And there's 420 comments.
Just sometimes, is it not just like things line up perfectly?
It just makes me feel good in my life when this happens.
Do not refresh.
I'm not gonna refresh.
Do not refresh.
Okay. Let's read what some of Hacker News has to say, because you say now that there's some more positive comments kind of coming in. All right.
Yeah. We can also go, we can maybe find some of the ones where people were just complaining. That's maybe where it's a little bit more fun to chat about. But some of these are, I think, pretty reasonable takes about LazyVim. Maybe like just a quick background on LazyVim. How familiar are you with like this as a distribution?
I'm not familiar. I just assume it's another version of LunarVim where it's just like, hey, you can effectively initialize any of the plugins to your hard contents, but maybe it gives you a bit more control.
Yeah, so the main thing that, from what I've seen, the difference for LazyVim versus some of the other distributions is LazyVim is really focused on not hiding anything about how plugins work. So if you like read the README of a plugin, then you like can still configure it exactly the same that you would otherwise. So like if you want to add your own plugins or do whatever, it's very easy to do all those kinds of things. But there's like some simple ways that you can kind of compose the configuration. So maybe LazyVim can provide a default like setup for something, and then you could add 3 key maps to it, right? So there's some sort of like this way that Folky set it up with both the distribution and the package manager that you're able to kind of, I still get the benefits of like things mostly work right away out of the box. Oh, this plugin updated, and so like the base distribution updates, but my additional configuration still works. So I kind of feel like LazyVim is a really good alternative for people who want to still change a few things for themselves, or maybe a lot of things, but also don't have sort of the experience where, every time, well, I don't personally experience this, but like the meme version of like every time I update, everything breaks, like that meme. That it doesn't really happen for this. And so like I consider it a really good, on the like spectrum of distributions, like there's Kickstart, which is like basically nothing, right? It just has
it's just a
small
script. Yeah.
Yep, just has one script and a setup, and then you're supposed to take it yourself. Like LazyVim is the next step on that one where you would want to do. And then there's maybe some other ones. I don't have as many opinions about like the further along that spectrum.
Okay, so it's like a partially opinionated Vim setup, but it allows you to do a lot of things yourself. So I could do my own after folder and then perhaps configure the plugins the way I want to in my own after folder, and it doesn't feel so like, because that was one of my big gripes with LunarVim. Even though, I mean, obviously I'm not saying anything against Chris Hatmachine, great guy. Did a great job with it, but it's one of those things where if you want to change something, you have to learn both how the plugin works and how Chris Hatmachine has set up LunarVim such that you can now make edits to it. And that's a little bit more confusing.
Yeah, there are some specific ways to LazyVim that you can configure things, but like you can also go the default way for other stuff too. So there's sort of like a range for how you can do it.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if there's anything. Let's try to find some good juice. Okay, many people complain about the time you need to have a proper Vim. in computer security, I learned to make my own tools, to develop my own scripts that match what I want to do/scan. For Vim, this is exactly the same. I started with Python, so my Vim became the best Python IDE for me, and that's all. What I said to junior dev is, here's my Vim conf. You are allowed to copy and paste only what you understand. Then this sounds a little neckbeardy. You may only copy and paste what you understand.
Well, it could be in a nice tone. Like, hey, here it is. Like, just only copy and paste the stuff you understand. There's a range that could be read.
I know. But
just because you're salty from the last article that we read doesn't mean that everyone's talking exactly like that.
It could be. Okay, you're right. And then I did some TypeScript and added a configuration that works for me. Thus, the pain point came from my old config in Python. I found a new good plugins, added them, and so on with Rust and Ruby, and everything is committed so now and on a new machine. It takes me the time to copy, paste my config, and write plug install. Every time I test vsCode, it does not do what I want, and when I look into it, I can't configure it correctly. Vim has always had, yeah. So this is like your classic reason why you'd want to use Vim, right? Is that I'm the person that wants to understand how things work, and I want to be able to make it exactly how I want it. Not because, I mean, the reality is 99.99% of the time, I'm on my computer using my keyboard for my setup without anything else. So it's like, I don't care how you do it. I don't care that you understand how I do it. I type in Dvorak, by the way. Like, I just want to be like as
at Netflix.
By the way. I want to be as like dumb and dorky as possible on my thing, right?
Yeah, I think the other thing too is like there's a really good sort of idea that's presented there, which is you don't configure every possible thing of everything you might ever want to do.
Yeah.
He started with just, okay, well, I do Python, so I'm going to figure out how Python works good. And I'm just going to like, oh, I don't care that there's this other plugin that also manages every single distribution of all the things and well, I want Python to work. Let's get Python to work. Okay. Then later, nice. I'm going to do some TypeScript. I mean, well, this is not nice, but it's like, I guess we're doing TypeScript now. So now I need to figure out how to make TypeScript work. And so you just do it one step at a time instead of thinking, can I build the whole entire world into my config like on day one?
Yeah. That's the number one demise, right? Is either you have to keep up with every new plugin, right? I used Vundle for well past Vundle's life because it just worked, right? There's no strong win going to Packer other than it's like slightly nicer to configure, right? That's what you're doing. If I'm writing a brand new one with Lua, then okay, Packer's the better choice. But now as the next one comes out, it's again, you can make that change, but it's not needed. It doesn't buy you anything other than slightly newer version to do something. And that's how I always look at it, is people just, there's this idea that you have to have the newest thing or it has to be most up to date. It's like, nah, you can just use whatever for a long time.
Or like you just look at what the new features are and decide if they're worth it for you, right? Like maybe there's like lock files in Packer or Lazy, and that's like worth it to you so that when you install on a new machine, you can keep exactly what you had before.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, cool. So then change it. But if you never have the problem or you never switch machines or whatever, then don't change it.
Yeah.
You know, okay, cool. That's good.
Whatever, right? All right.
Whatever.
All right, I want to find some of the juicy ones. Where's some of these juicy ones?
No, this is another one that was, although I still don't understand people who, the flip side of people who basically do all their development on just basic Vim with nothing else.
Yeah.
Am I crazy?
So I know one person that did a lot of server work. So they're on the server performance team at Netflix. And so he always, this is some coding guy. He still does it. He still just programs, I think, in Vi most of the times. Where it's just like, he's just like, I'm always on a server when I'm at work, like splunking through things, turning on program counters, all that kind of stuff. And so it's just like, I'm very good at this one thing. And for me, it's just like, that's why I don't do anything undefault, meaning I only use most default items. And so the only thing that's probably my non-default, true non-default, would be either Telescope, because there's just like, that's just not a thing, or Harpoon, which is just like, now I'm using something that is replacing global marks, and global marks are really the thing you should be, swift at. So when I go on a server, I just use global marks, and then I'm happy, and boom, it just works. It's not even that hard.
I've never had to log into a server to edit anything.
I have to do it like twice a week.
Yeah. But even then, I still feel like I'm always just surprised that you wouldn't want to have a few more lines of config, even just that you could paste into a server if you really needed to. If you were going to do, like a day's worth of work on there, that maybe you would want to paste in, or like put it on a macro on your keyboard. I don't
did
know.
have
You
that.
could literally, you know, like just something like you really don't have any keyboard shortcuts that you want to do. You type out every command, or I'm always surprised when it's that small and it's your primary dev environment.
I did that. I actually did that for a while. I had on my previous Kinesis, I had it so that I
Yeah.
had just press one button, and it would just be like, like set tab 4, expand tab, like leader PV is like just sex bang, right? Like just did a couple things just so it's like, oh, okay, this is easy, this is nice, I can use this.
That's funny.
Just because it's a super pain in the ass when you're not used to it.
In case they say you can't copy and paste anything on there. Well, I'm technically not copy and pasting. It's all getting typed from my from my keyboard.
All right. Am I the only one using vanilla Vim with minimal configuration file, less than 50 lines? I set tabs to 4 spaces. I put syntax highlighting on, set background to dark, add fuzzy finding, and configure netrw. Very easy setup. Moreover, when I am on a different computer and open vanilla Vim without any configuration, I know that everything is more or less the same as my default Vim environment. I think it's not that hard to learn developing on the default Vim environment with some minor tweaks. Also
I
related,
would miss go to definition, and it depends on your language, I guess. So I know there's some people in this thread that are like, well, in Ruby, I just have to control F for everything. So we're like, okay, I guess, sure, that's fine.
You're already used to not having a language server because you don't believe in types. Like, that's fine. I get it.
But that's the one I would miss from that setup. I mean, a lot of my stuff I could probably drop if I had fuzzy finding and telescope, or fuzzy finding and LSP. I mean, basically, like if I have those two, then I feel pretty good. This is a great video though. If you've never watched this one,
we had one on
really
VimConf, right? Like 2 or 3 years ago. First VimConf.
Yeah, Leroy made one, right?
Yeah, Leroy made one where he just effectively did everything with just Vim instead of all the plugins, setting up C tags, doing all this kind of stuff. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm not gonna lie to you. Wait, hold on. Did I just replace it? Is that what happened?
I think you replaced it. Yep.
It's so weird. All right, where's some of these people being angry?
I think it's the next one probably. Otherwise, I can find. Yes, this is. Here you go. Here you go.
All right, I've been using Vim for years. Switched to NeoVim, and at this point, I'm ready to throw in the towel and just use vsCode for anything beyond simple text editing. The amount of work needed to get a basic IDE up and running for your language of choice, even for commonly used languages such as Python or JavaScript, is far too much for someone who wants to get on with their day job or hobby coding and doesn't want to spend precious hours fixing obscure issues in Lua. Seething right now. Furthermore, the community
is angry. Very angry.
So angry. Furthermore, the community does not have a good culture of documentation and learning. I feel like NeoVim plugins tend to be one of the easier ones for the most part, and when I can't find the answer because I'm bad at using documentation, I just look at the code, and usually it's pretty easy to tell what's happening.
Yeah, I would say, well, certainly there exist plugins with no docs. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. But
I wrote those.
Yeah, right. Your plugins. No, I'm pretty sure Polar Mutex came in probably and wrote them.
Yeah, he did.
But certainly, like, the base editor and the way that you're supposed to do things are all extensively documented, right? And those sometimes plugins, I would say, maybe assume that you know some of those things. But what is the point of writing down what's in the built-in standard library docs again in your plugin if it's expected that you should know that already because there's docs somewhere? Like, you didn't read the first one. I know you're not going to read the second one. It doesn't matter how many times they put it in front of you,
Yeah, this is true. All right, too many plugins have very sparse docs or other online resources such as the NeoVim subreddit are hostile to newcomers with read the effing manual, a common answer.
Oh my goodness, wait, can we stop? Because
Yeah.
the first thing is it doesn't have a good culture of documentation, and then the second part is people say read the docs.
Which tells me the answer might be in the docs.
Wait, hold up. They just never have any docs, and also people tell them to read the docs. So it's.
I will say, I mean, to be fair, as someone on the outside, reading NeoVim docs, sometimes it's hard to find the right one, right?
Yes.
Like I find that there's sometimes where I'm off in the wrong area looking at the wrong thing, and that can be difficult.
True. I feel most people, though, in the places mentioned, like NeoVim subreddit or wherever else you would be coming, don't just say literally RTFM. They say help and then a thing, like : help, wrap or something, right? If you want
And
to
that
learn about
helps.
text wrap.
And that helps.
And then
Yeah.
and then you just go there and
Yeah.
then read it, right? That's not saying RTFM, find it yourself. That's saying here's where you could read it. Then you need to go do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And that's identical to just like giving a link to a website and saying, "Hey, the answer's right here."
Yeah.
It's just
So
maybe
I'm
it
not
feels
saying
more
that means
hostile.
that it's
So.
I'm not saying it means that it's easy though for people to get started, right? That's not necessarily like those aren't the same things. I'm just saying for this particular point, I just don't really agree because I do think there is a culture of documentation and learning, and that people, when they give an answer, generally, except for a few angry people on the subreddit, are legitimately giving you the right thing. But why would they try and write it in a different way if there's someone there?
Yeah, exactly. The community is also fragmented, with too many ways to do the same thing in the name of the same platonic ideal of personal freedom over practicality. In some sense, this is true. There is a lot of package managers, right? At this point, there's been a lot of them. I can think of at least about 7 over the past 6 years.
Name 7.
All right. Vundle, Plug, Packer, Lazy. You have the Vim default plugin manager.
That gets used by those, but sure, I'll allow it.
There's Pathogen.
Okay, sure, if you want to call that a package manager.
It was literally a package manager. And then there was one more besides for Vundle and Pathogen that I'm trying to remember. That was
there's Dane. I'll give you a hint.
Dane.
You can pick
there you
Dane
go.
then.
Dane.
That's fine.
See, I knew there was one more. I'm like, I just haven't done it. And Pathogen, I used Pathogen. Then I used
can think
Vundle.
of more ways to try and build a JavaScript bundle though than that, right? Like, I mean, so I get the complaint that there's multiple ways to do things, but I don't really get what the solution is that people expect. Right? Like, what's the solution?
I think the solution is that, I think really what it comes down to is people want Vim to do this. That's what they want.
Okay, yeah, sure, okay. Right, and I get that. Yeah. I'm saying, but like, what's the solution? I would also like if my computer never crashed. But like, that's also not what just happened, and then it just randomly turned off. Like, I don't know what to tell you. There are some things that are difficult to solve.
This is true. This is why there's 7 separate package managers, is because no one.
And each of them are legitimately, like, some of them are in some ways a succession to the other ones, and some of them are legitimately very different. Like, Dane's focus is on you configure via TOML files, and it's like very declarative, and you set it up and it runs these things and it does other stuff, right? Versus like Pathogen or NeoVim's built-in packages, which, like, to be fair, we inherited from Vim. So there's some choices there that maybe we wouldn't have made, right? Are literally like, how do you modify the runtime path to add these, versus like Lazy, which is trying to be in a lot of ways like a next-gen Lua one that integrates deeply into the ecosystem. So you're like, okay, but those are legitimately different things. I don't say that people are making them for the platonic ideal of personal freedom, right? That's like a straw man argument about it. Like, the reason is because people have different wants and desires, and they do happen to be free to be able to make those choices. Like,
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I don't think it's often because of that. It's not because I just want my own version. I almost know almost know nobody that's just like, I'm a free man. I write my own scripts for everything. Right? A simple question.
I think, well, to be fair though, that is a perfectly fine reason to build something, and I think it's cool that NeoVim lets you do that. Like, that's a benefit. I think even if it makes it like harder for someone new, it's cool that you can just build whatever part you want for any part of your stack for this and just do it. That's cool.
Yeah,
I think that's cool.
A simple question like, how do I set up Black with NeoVim to format my Python files on save? Will yield a dozen answers, each with someone's favorite plugin. Setting up that plugin will require another plugin, and so on until you end up with a Jenga tower of dependencies so that it doesn't quite work the way you want, but is too fragile and time-consuming to tweak correctly. I mean, that's true. Let me. I know, TJ, you're like, no, this is not true, but let me tell you why. In some sense it's true. One reason why it's true is because what someone will do inevitably is on save, they will just simply execute like a shell command to save the script and pipe Black into it and fix it. But then you don't get a refresh on your current buffer, and then you get this weird like, hey, for you to save, you have to do yes or no and take in the newest version, and you feel kind of all goofy. So then you try to look for a plugin that does the thing you want it to do. And then you end up in these weird areas where you don't quite know what one to pick, and then it gets kind of confusing. You can say the same thing with like Pretty or all this. Even though it is a solved problem, you just have to kind of know what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think for languages with a reasonable LSP, this happens automatically now with basically no config. You
Yep.
can just use vim.lsp.format, right? Like,
Yep, I use it all the time.
So that one is, so like for languages that have a cohesive ecosystem, then that's easier, right? Or you can try and install like a distribution that handles those things, right? Like in the sense that's what you're doing with vsCode or other things. Formatting is like one that's currently kind of difficult. And we actually talked about this recently on the
Yep.
null.ls one, right? In the sense that like for TypeScript, you have TSS server that's going to format, you have ESLint, and you have Prettier. And then like also someone on your team added some new one because they want to, you're like, okay, well now there's like 5 different like separate executables that have to run on your file every time you save. That is somewhat like difficult to manage. And a lot of people, I think, like it just works in VS Code, as in like it happens to go this way, and so that's what we chose. That's not really like the same thing as VS Code always fixing the problem, as it is like, oh well, they happen to enjoy a large market share, and so then you end up picking those things sort of by default. Which I'm not saying that that's like wrong or bad or you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that picking NeoVim, I think you kind of sign up to do some of those. You recognize that you're not the most popular editor in terms of users.
Yeah.
That seems fine.
So that is a good point, which is that, when you use Rust, Rust, by the way, or Go or Zig, there's a singular tool to do a singular task. So formatting is a solved, simple problem. When you use TypeScript, it's not simple. It will never be simple because there's not a single tool to do any single thing. In fact, even the most singular tool, which is NPM, actually has yarn and PNPM, and probably there's another one soon to drop at any moment. It's just like yet another meta tool to manage your tools. And even so, the funny thing is, after we had this talk with null.ls where we're joking about the formatting, that exact same day, I had to write a class in JavaScript that also implemented something that took in a generic and it crossed my 80-line boundary. And I didn't realize I had an ESLint rule that would move a parenthesis to a new line and a Prettier rule that would move it to the same line. And so until I committed it and CI failed, and I was like, oh, I didn't run Prettier. Weird. So I ran Prettier, saw the change, committed it, pushed it, and then it failed on ESLint. And I'm like, oh, gosh, no. And then I realized that I had 2 competing rules, one that would change it one place, one would change the other. And I realized that, the problem is that ESLint is more than lint. It also formats in some certain cases. Turn it off, right? So I'm going through turning off the formatting. But nonetheless, that's a real problem. That's the problem of formatters. It's very, very funny.
And you can run into that anywhere, right? It may happen to be that you run into that more often in NeoVim. I'm not trying to make the case that it's easier to do that in NeoVim than it is in other places, but like I also never have to think about formatting for the languages I write because I have one LSP thing that's like 3 lines, and that turns on the formatting on save, which you don't have to do. If you only want to do it when you're running it, manually, which I know is your preference, then you do it only when you want to run it. So I think that part is kind of like there's some difficulty in the fact that Python also has multiple different ways to do dependencies. And also I always find it's sort of like, okay, if you search something online and there's 10 results and some of the results are 10 years old and some of them are from 6 months ago, I don't always think that that's like a crazy thing to try and evaluate which one seems more relevant to today's world. Right? That doesn't if you just search JavaScript and you just take whatever one was from React from 5 years ago and everyone's doing hooks, or I don't know, maybe that was only 2 years ago. I don't know anything about
you clearly have no idea. Hooks.
Are people still doing hooks? Maybe I'm wrong.
Hooks was like 7 years ago, man.
I don't know anything about React. All I know is what I know from people getting angry on Twitter. But you wouldn't say that React, isn't well documented or something because there are answers on the internet that are out of date. You should go to you'd go to maybe some. So not saying that it's exactly the same situation again, but I just sort of feel like, I don't know, you can go and look at the answer, and if one project's getting updated every day in the last 6 months and one hasn't been touched since 2017, I don't think that it's super confusing to be like, which one seems like the modern way to solve this?
All right. In the meantime, I can just Control P and install what I want in VS Code and be on my way in a few minutes. or Control capital P. I don't particularly
That's not
like...
true. Melky had to make a whole video about configuring VS Code after he switched. So
I know there's a whole bunch here that he's not. That the thing is that when you use VS Code and you want to make any customization, you also have to find the right JSON property in the right JSON file to go JSONify, and yet it's not as simple as it is made to be. I don't particularly like VS Code. It's heavy and slow and janky, particularly on older laptops. I don't like being sucked back into the Microsoft ecosystem after spending years getting away from it, but ultimately I just want to get on with my job, and my job is not Lua developer or NeoVim plugin expert. Reasonable.
that part's reasonable. I get that. I mean, that's an obvious thing that we're trying to solve, generally speaking. I'll just say, you want me to give my hottest of hot takes that I've been thinking about lately? It's not that hot, but it's like...
I just got done making a smoldering take on.
You did. All right, so mine will be safe.
Yeah, yours is safe.
It's like that one meme where the guy's standing and catching all the arrows.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here with my hot take. So my hot take is, if I have something that is approximately as effective, and it's not from Microsoft, even if let's even say 5%, 10% slower, or I have to do extra work, I'm gonna try and pick the one that's not from Microsoft. There you go.
Yep,
that's my hot take.
I'm on that team too. I'm literally on that team, 110%. Which is, if I can avoid the one that's just like, Microsoft's entire goal is to get you to use VS Code, because they're going to use all that knowledge that they're sending back with telemetry, along with you having free repos on GitHub, to train an AI to make a bunch of money off of you. Like, that's literally what Microsoft is doing. They're using it as a way to make money off of you, because it's not free. There's no way they're paying 30 developers out of the goodness of their heart because they're like, oh, we have a couple extra billions laying around. Let's love on developers. No, they know you give a lot of money and you make a lot of money, and they want to make a lot of money off you.
So chat saying stop using GitHub. No, I said if it's approximately equal, I'm going to choose, right? I don't think that a lot of the other competitors to GitHub right now are approximately equal, which is why I'm still on GitHub today. Like, NeoVim gets a lot of extra contributions and a lot of extra things happening because it's on GitHub versus somewhere else, right? And it's a direct competitor to VS Code, like, if you think about it. So we're actively using what like Microsoft has done, right? And so then that's fine. So I think that there's so I'm just saying, I'm not saying Microsoft's like the most evil company ever or whatever. I'm just saying, if I have the option between those two, then I'm going to choose the one that like isn't with Microsoft. So if it requires a little bit of extra time for me, then I would pick that anyways. I think that I like NeoVim better anyways than VS Code, right? But I'm saying, even if it wasn't there, I think it's a win for me personally. I'm not telling you what to do, chat.
Yeah, chat.
Yeah.
Let's see, hold on. The amount of work I needed to not only get a basic IDE up and running for your languages of choice, and even the commonly used languages such as Python and Java, is far too much for someone who wants to spend their day job or hobby coding and doesn't want to spend precious hours fixing obscure issues in Lua. Okay, here we go. Here's the response.
Yep.
This airplane is the choice of professional pilots. The first thing we advise you to do is turn the yoke upside down. It's much more ergonomic like that. Also, you probably want to rip out the altimeter and replace it with a custom one that has more features. And bring your own GPS unit and tape it to the windshield, because this plane doesn't have one by default. And of course, remember that unlike in your car, left actually means right in this plane. This is the professional way. Ah, yes. When you fly over Canada, you will see a blinking warning sign telling you that you're out of fuel. That's just a small glitch caused by the metric imperial confusion. It has been known for 23 years, but we haven't quite gotten around to fixing it yet. Don't worry, this plane is still excellent for professional pilots. If you feel otherwise, you're probably not a real professional. So I'd assume this is a scathing review of NeoVim.
I can't tell which one.
I know, I can't tell if this is like ironic or unironic.
Well, I can't tell if it's saying basically like, oh, well, you shouldn't want to switch anything because someone else who's way smarter than you made all the choices. And so you're just a dumb idiot. You should trust your Microsoft overlords. Or if it's saying Microsoft can't fix small things, so you should try and do others. I literally can't tell which way I'm trying to be convinced by this.
So how I read it is that the airplane of professional pilots is NeoVim. So to be able to use NeoVim, you have to go through all these complicated steps that are really confusing, and sometimes it doesn't work, like the Canada out of fuel thing. And if you don't use it, you're actually not a real professional, right? That's how I'm reading it.
Is going, it's pro NeoVim, and then the next one, this is anti NeoVim, and then the next one, 100% Microsoft shill post.
It's literally the Heisen post. No one actually knows what's happening right now. All right.
Okay, nice.
Let's see. Okay, let's keep on going. I mean, these comments are kind of funny. More that you want to carve a bowl out of wood. Vim is like a knife with some modifications that you can turn into a carving knife. VS Code is like a chainsaw that has attachments that have been made for it, and also the bowl carving attachment. If you
next
don't
level wizard comment here, you can tell this guy's a next level wizard.
I'm not on that level, hence the reason why I'm struggling here. If you don't know your tools, then you can easily mess the knife modification and not end up with the carving knife. The chainsaw with the ready-made attachments is easier to get going, but in return, you have to carry the chainsaw with you. And if there is any problem with the tool itself, you probably aren't going to be able to fix or modify it yourself. So it is a bit more like trading initial speed with more precision, but also being able to do more after initial learning curve. Oh, baby. Is this, okay. Are we getting into full? Oh, yeah, Pew's coming back. Okay, so I think I'm right on how I read it because Pew's coming back. He's getting ready for the... Okay,
I'm ready. We'll finally have clarity on the first comment now. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, the chainsaw with a ready-made attachment is way easier to get going. Okay, well, you remember that.
Yep.
This is where your analogy breaks down for me. The chainsaw, VS Code, is absolutely perfect for the tasks I'm using it for. When I write Python code, the Python extension gives me exactly what I want. That's because the environment it creates has been fine-tuned based on feedback from thousands of users with similar requirements to my own. There's no need for me to modify anything, any more than I modify my own car or my trousers.
Trousers, nice.
Classic trousers. It's simply ready for me to do professional work. And whenever I have a special requirements, I know that I will find an extension that caters to them also. I don't need or want to reinvent the wheel that has been invented hundreds of times already and polished to perfection through more man hours than I could ever hope to invest myself. This guy loves VS Code.
He really thinks they've got every single thing perfectly fixed. That sounds great. Then he should use VS Code. That sounds good.
He has trees and he has a chainsaw. Let's go.
Yeah, it seems like VS Code's working great for him. That's good. Okay, sweet. You should keep doing that. That sounds awesome.
Then just use the chainsaw and accept that the knife may be absolutely perfect for tasks of somebody else. Ooh.
Wrong.
Got him.
This is Hacker News.
News.
Nope. Downvote him. Downvote him now. Can you even downvote on Hacker
News? I'm
not
even logged in. You get not even close. You get exactly the same functionality with NeoVim plugins. The only difference is that because Vim has been open source for decades, there are many more plugins, and hence the choice is harder to make. VS Code also helped improve the NeoVim experience. Language servers.
True.
Comparing VS Code and Vim is like comparing a standard calculator with an RPN one. What's an RPN?
Reverse Polish notation.
Oh, I just didn't expect to see reverse Polish notation here. I'm like over here trying to think of a calculator. I'm like, is this like a TI-86? Like, what are we talking about? Like,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay. The only difference is because Vim has been open source for a decade. There are many more plugins. No, the main difference is the quality of plugins, not how many there are. For example, Rust Analyzer provides an official VS Code extension, which is professionally maintained by members of the Rust core team. The extension is part of the Rust Analyzer project itself and can be installed with a single click, at which point it just works. For Vim, you have to manually download and update Rust Analyzer binary. I mean, to be fair, when you update Rust, you also update the analyzer, so it's like it's already kind of there.
It's true.
It's kind of a thing already. Install a third-party plugin, configure them to work together, and hope that the whole thing doesn't break when the plugin or the language server is updated, and two, that is Concoction provides a tiny fraction of the functionality that the official VS Code extension does.
What?
I feel like I'm just going down a dumb hole of people arguing. Like, if there's ever been a time of people arguing over wasting time, this is like the most ironic take of arguing over wasting time. Let's keep on going.
It's just flat false. I mean, maybe for Vim, some of that's true, but for NeoVim, it's not true. So first off, when you use Rust up, you can just add the component. So every time you install your latest version of Rust, it'll install the exact right version of Rust Analyzer with that, which is good. That's what you'd want. So that part's not true. You don't need to install a third-party client because we have built-in LSP, and you don't even need LSP config. You just can use that if you want. And then what was the last part? I forgot the third one.
You have to if you update it doesn't the last one, which is just objectively
configure
false.
them to work together.
But it's the concoction provides a tiny fraction of the functionality that the official VS Code extension does.
Maybe if you wrote it in like a really small font, it would be a tiny fraction, but otherwise it seems like basically the same. Otherwise,
Sick
I don't
burn.
know.
Okay, someone said demo it. I think I had this. Okay, so here you go. I'm just gonna keep this here for a quick second. I forgot why I was doing that. I think I was here. I'm gonna. All right, let's just get rid of this stuff. All right, here. Someone says, oh, look at this. See, here you go. You'll notice that I have context of where I'm at. Look at that nice, beautiful context. See, I got that Vim. That's beautiful, right? That's 52 lines up, 43 lines up, 37 up. So if I go 52 up, I jump right up to the, look at that. Jumped right up to it. Look how beautiful that is. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Rust TypeScript. Someone said it's something about Rust. You can go in here. You can see that I have, here's a warning. Shape is not defined. There's the hover menu. I can see where all these things are created. I can hop through them nice and quickly. I can actually see that all my switch statements or my match statements don't have the proper exhaustive pattern. Everything's done. It's that simple.
That's not a plugin. That's built-in LSP.
Oh,
so
damn.
that's just
I
the
thought
editor.
Are you sure
Sorry.
that's not an extensive and amazing?
This concoction sucks, and it provides tiny fractions.
Tiny fractions. Look at the fractional speed I'm using. Yeah, I don't know. I have a fairly incomplete, very simple setup. I'm using almost all just plugins just to do it, just to try it out.
I guess what's probably true is since it maybe isn't official, like you couldn't put the TM next to it. So maybe that's what he really likes. Like he likes that the vsCode one can have Rust TM on it, but ours we can't put the TM there because
You'll get sued.
It's not official.
Yeah, and the suings will happen, and you don't want any of that. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see. For what it's worth, I just needed to install the default NeoVim LSP plugin. It's provided by the NeoVim maintainers, and it doesn't do anything besides provide default LSP server configs for a lot of languages built into the. Yep, that's why you install it, is just because you don't want to learn how to configure your own, which is perfectly fine. Paste in the keybinds recommended by the README and call LSP Rust setup in the Lua. That's literally what I do. To start it, start whenever Rust Analyzer is in path. Seems to work well enough. I don't think I'm missing any functionality.
You are. It's a tiny fraction.
The tiniest of fractions. I agree with your main point. You have to do quite a few things to configure these plugins, and some of it's not straightforward. However, I program Rust using Lunar Vim, default configuration for Vim, and it has been very straightforward. I have all the features I need to program comfortably, and I didn't need to configure anything. The defaults were good enough for me, so that doesn't mean that Vim cannot do the same easy of use if it doesn't mean that Vim cannot have the same easy of use if there exists some sane default configuration you can just install. I'm happy with it and not going to change to vsCode or something else.
Wait, is chat actually saying that doing the things listed above were 10 obscure things? It's simple. They're literally just what's provided and told you to do in the docs. Like go to help LSP, read the steps, and then do it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying that it's intuitive is just made up because it's about what people's expectations are. So like VS Code isn't intuitive for me.
Yeah.
Right.
I find VS Code very confusing because I'm not used to that
environment. So you're wrong because it's not intuitive for me. So there you go. You assume we can read the problem all along.
That's truly the problem. All right, let's do a little bit more and we'll be done. No, the main difference is the quality of plugins, not how many there are. I don't think that is true. If you browse the VS Code marketplace and search for Python, you literally get hundreds of plugins. If you scroll down only a bit, you quickly end up with plugins that only have a few hundred to a few tens download. Or a few 10 downloads. I highly doubt that the quality of these plugins is better than the plugins for NeoVim. For Rust Analyzer plugin example, I can install Rust Analyzer with Mason in a few seconds as well, and then if you have set up LSP 0, it just works, trademark. But I agree, keeping a Vim configuration up to date
put a trademark?
is akin to a hobby, which I enjoy quite a bit. Badam. Yeah. I think this is all fine. I cannot believe how long this argument. Do we have anything more from Pew Pew Pew?
Oh,
no.
They're just so mad. They're just going to keep going. That's the best part, too, is like, it basically, the reason that I don't like the tone for how some of the VS Code people talk about it is basically like, it's just stupid to use anything else, right? But I'm not saying it's stupid to use VS Code. I'm saying it's fine. And like Mr. Microsoft up there, Pew, if you really like VS Code and it does everything exactly the way you want, then you should keep using it. That seems fine.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Use your chainsaw.
Yeah. Use your chainsaw with the carving attachment.
Yeah. that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. Me personally, I don't really like configuring Vim that much. I like having the option to build my little plugins that I like our little little text scroller thing that we were building and all that.
Oh yeah,
that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing that. And so it's just like whenever I want something, it's fun to have that choice. And the API is super simple to build your own plugins. Other than that, I just use like the default everything. I just don't even care. I don't have time. I don't got time to be configuring every day. I got a life. I got kids. I got a wife.
Yeah.
I don't use
that's the other thing, I guess. Like it doesn't really bother me, but I also get sort of, I don't know, confused because people talk like they're always configuring NeoVim, and I don't really get that. Like as someone I'm very involved in the community and like in the editor itself, and I've spent a lot of time, writing plugins and stuff, but I don't actually spend very much time changing anything in my config.
Yeah.
So that part
I do it once a year for like a week or 2 days. Really, I do it over a weekend. And I'm just like, that is my new config for 2023 to 2024. The end. All right, that's enough of this. This is ridiculous.
That is.
I don't know why people get so upset about things. I like how it's sharing, like, hey, here's a cool way to use NeoVim. And someone's just like, what sucks? Not using VS Code. You're like, how did you arrive? We're not even talking about them. Hey, man.
Yeah.
I just want to show you this cool new thing. Anyways, the name is the Primogen.